today we're going to be using a song that I found online by the artist called MegaGoneFree. This song is called Talking Bout Bri. And we're going to use the song and we're going to take a look at the lyrics specifically to explore how changing your identity may be an attempt to outrun your past in some cases. Every time I have listened to that song and paid attention to the lyrics, I just feel like very struck by it. It's a profound song and it is really an amazing illustration of how some young people are feeling about their name, their identity, and how to move past it. And I wanted to start by saying I'm not trying to pick on Mega specifically. This is an artist who clearly is a brilliant songwriter, very talented singer. And the fact that this video has 1.9 million views, and I think somewhere else it was reported 3 million views, something like that. This song has really struck a chord with a lot of young people. So it's a very useful avenue for us to explore some of these issues. And, artists often use figurative language and metaphor and really strong, powerful lyrics to express how they're feeling or something about themselves, but it doesn't mean they literally understand themselves that way. So I want to kind of take all of that into consideration. I don't want to demonize the lyrics of this song. Artists express their pain through their music, through whatever avenue of art and creation they have. So I don't want to go down the road of, these songs are ruining our kids. But the point is, this is an important illustration of the kind of struggle young people are going through and how they're making sense of their past and who they are now and who they want to be. And I just think it's a really valuable way to explore these themes. So the first theme that we can see in this song is the movement towards a new life. Mega talks about now being embraced and loved. I don't know if that's from her YouTube channel or moving to a new city. She talks about having moved from Baltimore. So there's kind of this concept of turning over a new leaf and starting fresh. And this is a very normal, healthy part of adolescence. But there's a real way that it seems like Mega has left behind who she used to be, as we can see in the rest of the song. And that's the second theme, which is the movement away from an old life. Her previous life, based on the lyrics, seems to have been associated with a lot of difficulty. She calls it drama. And this old person that she's describing in the song, Bri, was a people pleaser and always trying to accommodate everybody else's expectations. And Mega talks about Bri as having run away like a coward. So there are aspects of herself when she was Bri, as though she could become a totally new person. There's parts of herself from her past that she's really disappointed with. She says, no one wants her. Fuck her baggage. So I wonder, of course, is that a message that she was kind of told or shown by people's behavior, people's rejection of her, or being treated poorly, or like losing a friend group, or perhaps not having acceptance, warmth, love in the right places. So there's a real sense of she is discardable. She is someone we can throw away. Nobody wants her. She says, do you ever wish that you could just erase all that took place and just start clean? And it really feels like this is what is happening in this song and for a lot of young people, which we'll keep talking about later. She talks about regret. So I think too about the kind of developmental period of life that this young person is in, which we'll have a section about that later. But regrets and trying to grapple with mistakes that we've made or things that we shouldn't have done is a really difficult and important part of kind of growing up and growing into ourselves. So it seems like in this situation, there was a lot of kind of ambiguous drama from the life of Bri that Mega has moved away from. And as you guys may know, with your kids, oftentimes there's a precipitating event before the identity change. So whether that is losing some important peers, like maybe your friend group has broken up and you're all of a sudden alone. Maybe there's some sort of very difficult experience with like a crush or a romantic kind of partner or boyfriend or girlfriend or some sort of romantic rejection. And there are, a whole host of things that could happen, but there's often a precipitating event that likely has induced a huge deal of shame and the young person does not know how to deal with it. And so that seems to trigger this kind of movement towards a brand new identity and leaving all that past behind you. You know, it's normal for young people to kind of become somewhat dark and rebellious. But of course, there's something quite morbid about the idea of basically killing off your old self. Young people who are understandably having a hard time making sense of their suffering, of their distress, of difficult things they're going through, may feel as though this feels bad, therefore I am bad, and I have done something wrong, or I'm going to turn against myself, or turn against the world, or hide myself away. So I think about how in kind of the Joseph Campbell's hero journey archetype of stories, there's usually always the hero of the story is kind of living life in a normal way, and then is called to some sort of adventure, and then he has to go to kind of the depths of the scariest things and fight the big battle or face the demons or whatever. But then when the hero comes back into his world, he is transformed and he's a new person. And it's interesting because the way that this song exemplifies identity change and outrunning your past is almost like a thwarted hero's journey. Because rather than truly confronting the uncomfortable thing or the scary thing or the challenging thing and overcoming it or battling it and transforming through that growth process, it seems like in this song, what Mega is saying is, I'm just going to get rid of that, all that drama and all of that baggage and just become a new person and put it behind me. Another theme that I thought was very interesting was the theme of becoming exceptional. Mega alludes to something which I think is really important, which is that following the rules and being a good kid, eating all the veggies on my plate, as she says, isn't always very empowering. It's not always that exciting. And during the adolescent years, of course, is the time when young people are trying to figure out how to embody kind of a unique sense of self and experiment with kind of edgy identities in a way. And she says multiple times in the song, she was too mediocre, right? And I thought there was something really interesting, specifically from some of the YouTube comments. This comment from one of her subscribers or followers had 1.2 thousand likes. And it's a quote, and it says, I sat up straight, I got straight A's, ate all the veggies on my plate, yet I'm 20, still a dummy, unquote. And then the commenter writes, as a burnt out ex-gifted kid, this hits harder than anything I've heard in any other song. So I immediately kind of zeroed in on that comment and thought, wow, so these are kids who are basically saying, I was the compliant good kid. I did everything you told me. I got straight A's. And what do I have to show for it? And it's very hard when you are trying to do the right thing and following all the rules, and yet something bad still happens to you, and this reminds me a bit of what Stella often talks about, which is the Disneyfied childhood and the expectation that like everything is just going to go so smoothly all the time. And the truth is, bad things happen even to quote good people, or even when people are doing the right things. Sometimes other people are cruel. Sometimes people that you care about disappoint you. These are kind of really difficult things to grapple with, because I think a lot of young people believe this idea that, well, if I do the right things, everything will be okay. Maybe because I've been told that, whether explicitly or subtly or implicitly. I think a lot of young people pick up from their families, from the world around them, that, well, as long as you study and get good grades, you'll get the good grade on the test, and you'll get a good grade in your classes, and you'll get into a good college. And like, as though if you, quote, do the right thing, everything will be fine. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes things are really, really difficult and painful. So I thought that was very interesting. And in terms of this kind of being exceptional, even in a negative way, I'm thinking about a lot of parents that I've talked to who tell me things like, our family has a comfortable life. Our kids never really get yelled at or punished. But I noticed, for example, on my daughter's TikTok account or her Instagram, she's saying that like all of these things are terrible in her life, which aren't true. So I think some young people are kind of fabricating or exaggerating their difficulties in order to garner sympathy online, or in order to um, kind of like have a fantasy of suffering in a way that feels worthy of sympathy in our culture. I think a lot of kids right now are having a hard time figuring out how to garner sympathy. Um, so I think that some kids will kind of create this persona online of a young person who's really, really suffering or is experiencing abuse or things like that. Now, that could be very serious, and it could be a sign of really complicated mental health issues going on. So I don't want to minimize what could be causing that, but there may be an element of fantasy here about, having some difficult obstacle to overcome. And I also just want to say, on the other side of this, the story that Mega is reporting here, of course, I don't know Mega myself, but she's saying she had, like a dime in her pocket or something, and she moved from Baltimore where things were really tough. She was just trying to make ends meet. And so I just want to take a moment to say there's a perception that gender distress is exclusively an upper middle class white phenomenon. And I don't think that's true at all. I just think the kinds of parents who are connecting with each other and engaging in these like online debates and on Twitter and stuff probably represent a certain type of demographic. But I know for sure that a lot of different kids who actually do have, well, first of all, maybe different racial backgrounds that still have privilege and money and status and all of that, but also kids who come from an underprivileged background of all races and ethnicities. So I don't think this is exclusively kind of a rich white girl phenomenon, if that makes sense. And I remember when I was talking with Helena, she's a young woman now. She's detransitioned. She's not as active in the online world as she used to be, but she's very, very intelligent. She talks about her experience of trans identity between 15 and 19. And she talked about how, she was from like a middle upper class family. And in these online spaces, she felt like because she had a privileged background, she really wasn't entitled to like sharing her distress. So it became apparent really quick, especially in social justice online spaces, that in order to legitimately gripe about anything, you actually need some sort of a victim status. And so that kind of led her into, identifying with non-binary, because that's a marginalized group. So there's a lot of complicated factors here. And I think if you think about all of the young people that may be getting wrapped up in this gender thing, inevitably, some of them are actually coming from abusive homes and very dire circumstances. And being able to share aspects of their life or maybe develop a new persona online is going to have a very different psychological meaning for those kids. And I just think it's important that we don't kind of flatten the ROGD experience into one thing, because there are a lot of different kids that I'm sure are represented in this kind of population of young people who are experimenting with gender. So in that case, if you have been suffering silently, let's say in a home or a relationship, or being bullied at school or something that you have not gotten any care for, maybe for some of these kids, they're being seen for the first time in an online space or through a new identity that they have curated on the internet. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Okay, another theme is splitting off parts of yourself. There was so much about this in the lyrics in the video. She says, "The ugly side, the part I hide, lies deep inside of me." Correction, that was Bri. So she's saying all of the stuff that is ugly and that I try to hide away and that I can't stand, that's actually not me. That's Bri. That's why she's dead. That's why I'm not dealing with her anymore. That bitch something or other, right? So that is a very powerful and very clear example of splitting off parts of the self. She says, I took away her power. Her name is dead to me. Last I heard, she's getting meaner. If you see her, let me know. I'll try harder, guarding all her damage. Lately, I'm thinking I'm crazy. I'm convinced everyone hates me. No, not me. I mean, everyone hates Bri. We are two separate entities. I mean, I have goosebumps just reading that. That's so incredibly powerful and very, very, very sad. Because what this means, again, if we're going to take these lyrics literally, like kind of an expression of someone's inner sense, she's saying, I can't even feel the hurt and work through it and process it and move past it because I'm splitting off that entire experience. I'm thinking about when we had Rose on the podcast. She was talking about Gordon Neufeld, who is a psychologist who talks about attachment and parent-child relationships, and how he talks about the need for tears, because tears mean you have resigned a hope or expectation that you know is not going to be able to happen, or something like that. Tears mean you were holding on to something that you knew in your heart was not going to come, and you finally have let it go. And being able to cry about that is really important. So, for example, if somebody has deeply, deeply betrayed you, you have to accept the disappointment and the harm and the hurt and the sadness that came along with that experience. And once you're able to do that, actually you'll feel better and you'll have more clarity about what to do next. Am I going to keep this person in my life? Are they actually sorry and things are going to be different now? Or is this person so unhealthy for me that I can't talk to them anymore? Like, to have that clarity, we actually need the feelings. We need to process them and kind of help move them through our system. So when she has kind of split Bri off, that's the person everybody hates. That's the part of me that I don't like. You don't actually get to process those feelings around it. So this, in addition to being unable to process parts of yourself and feelings that you've had, this also relates to the past, right? So this is another theme that has come up in this song. Refusal to process the past and deal with regrets. So she says, I'd rather kill myself than reminisce on who I used to be. I'll put a bounty out on any memory someone has of me. This is so poignant when kids, especially when they first come out, especially I think when the families are kind of trying to negotiate with the child, and maybe I'll try to use the new name and pronouns. It's kind of awkward. Usually there's another request that's part of the kind of initial package of demands, and that's put away all my old pictures. Take down anywhere that says my name. If it's a Christmas stocking with my name, gone. If there's photos over the kind of fireplace or mantle, gone. And kids are sometimes like refusing to engage with any images, even digital images on your phone or like profile pictures of them. So this bounty out on anyone who has a memory of me is incredible, because not only is Mega saying internally, I'm going to control this aspect of myself that I don't like, but I'm going to force others to also be part of my like self-hate campaign in a way, right? If we're going to look at it literally, it's really, really intense to think that she's requesting other people to join her in that. And when we talk later about society and culture and our misunderstanding of this, we'll dive into that a little bit further. Another issue here is kind of developmental trajectory. And I think about this as being like a too close for comfort situation. So on Instagram, this artist, MegaGoneFree, has a video where she's got this song, her song playing in the background, and it's pictures of herself as a child, like a small child. And it's so surreal because you're listening to this song with these angry lyrics, like about this terrible person. You're imagining it's going to be some sort of villain that is like a horrible, horrible human being, like pillaging and but it's just a little kid. She's just a child. Like she's kind of just, I don't know, like a kid. Like how terrible can a kid possibly be? But it goes to show, of course, that shame and the feelings of kind of self-loathing that a lot of young people are struggling with due to, again, a complicated variety of factors. But it's sad because she's playing this song and showing just like a sweet, innocent kid. And I think anyone who's like an adult, like I experienced a very protective, like I saw pictures of this little girl kind of like smiling, holding a tennis ball or something. And I immediately felt protective over her. So it's really surreal to hear these very aggressive, cruel kind of lyrics about herself as a kid. And it's also making me think about something that I use in therapy at times, which is trying to reparent yourself. Trying to imagine and recall yourself when you were young in a very vulnerable time or in a vulnerable memory. And then now as an older person, what would a warm, loving, parental version of yourself say to that young child? And, Kristen Neff often talks, she's also a psychologist who writes about self-compassion. And she says, talk to yourself as you would talk to a person you love very, very much. Would you ever talk to someone you love the way you talk to yourself? And this is really exemplified by the lyrics of this song. This is an internal dialogue, which is very self-critical and quite cruel. But I think we all go through a period of time where it's too close, it's too soon to have that self-compassionate voice about something that we did in the past. And I think often we need to develop some distance from it emotionally, psychologically, temporally, or maybe sometimes geographically for us to be able to reflect back with that self-compassion. And usually some years have to pass in between. So I'm even thinking about on Transparency podcast, Kimberly and Aaron Terrell, two transgender men who I've heard them talking on their show about looking at pictures of themselves when they were young and how at a certain period of time they couldn't really look at their old pictures. And now that they're older, maybe it's because they transitioned. Maybe it's just because they're in a better space, like psychologically. Maybe it's because of the passage of time. Maybe it's some other thing that we can only guess about. But how now they're able to look back at their little girl pictures and have a much more compassionate kind of understanding of where they were and who they were. So that's very interesting. And it makes me especially interested when it comes to how trans identity can encourage people to really block off and split off parts of themselves. When we are able to feel more confident in a specific domain where we have previously struggled, that can also help us relate to our previous self with more objectivity, more compassion, more clarity. So it's like if you've mastered something that used to be very difficult for you, then you kind of have a little more confidence about it, and it's not so risky to access those painful memories. So that may have something to do with it as well. So the more confident we can become, the more successful we can become at a specific thing, let's say socializing. If we have a solid group of friends, if we've learned how to go to a party and connect with new people, then we can look back about our very socially awkward middle school years, and it's not as painful. It doesn't sting as much as it did when we felt closer to that issue or that domain of our life. Another interesting topic here that I touched on in the June video is digiphrenia, a term which describes living in multiple online identities at the same time. So I'll just read a little piece about this from the authors of a book who wrote about digiphrenia. It's how technology lets us be in more than one place and self at the same time. Drone pilots suffer more burnout than real-world pilots, as they attempt to live in two worlds, both home and battlefield simultaneously. We all become overwhelmed until we learn to distinguish between data flows like Twitter that you can only dip into and data storage like books and emails that can be fully consumed. So I just thought that was a really interesting concept, given how not only are young people, for example, somebody like Mega, living in multiple worlds at the same time, but these identities allow you to be multiple people at different points in time. I've noticed that a lot of people who are desisting and detransitioning have a variety of relationships with returning to their old name. And I have seen, which I'll include in the links, a conversation between Prisha, who's a female detransitioner, and Shapeshifter, who's a male detransitioner, talking about how they couldn't really go back to their old names. And not so much because of, oh, it's my dead name, because they no longer really buy into trans identity in general as a concept, but because of the trauma that they were initially trying to escape. So in a case like that, this person is recognizing that my old name was associated with all this baggage and all this drama and trauma. And despite letting go of the trans identity, it still feels too painful to return to that name because it represents all of this other baggage for them. So I think that's very interesting. And we shouldn't presume that just because someone's over gender identity, for example, that they're going to return back to their old name. I think for some young people, the whole process of taking on a trans identity and living as trans, and then maybe medically transitioning or detransitioning, or even if it's just assistance, it's so disruptive and so life-changing that I think it feels hard to return to their birth name as well. Not maybe because of trauma specifically or some kind of specific thing in their past they're trying to disconnect from, but just because I feel like I have to move into a new phase of life with a new name. And of course, I think sometimes this might be adaptive. As we talked about in June, we live in kind of a new time where changing names is not seen as nearly as big of a deal as it might have been when I was growing up. And as I made that June video, so many people have reached out to me with interesting name stories like, oh, I have a friend who's female, but her name is Bob, or something like that. Or telling me stories about people they know who changed their names, not gender related. But it's very interesting. And name change isn't necessarily a sign of dissociating from your past, though I think in some contexts it certainly is part of like a bigger configuration of decisions and behaviors that are dissociative. And then lastly, I just want to say, of course, some desisters and detransitioners do return to their birth name and they try to reclaim what they have been disavowing. And I think stories like that are ones where people might say, I wasted so much time. I spent 5, 7, 8 years of my life convincing myself of this thing, and now I no longer believe it. I'm trying to pick up where I left off almost. Of course, changed, of course, different and transformed in a lot of ways. But obviously that happens too, reconnecting with the birth name. So what about our culture? How does our culture understand this integration or lack thereof of self and also of other? And I want to talk about dead naming in this context. And I'll start by kind of defining how I think of psychological integration. I think of this as the ability to weave various threads of your life, your personality, your experiences, your failures, your successes into kind of a whole person sense of who you are. So is being able to embrace yourself as a whole person, including parts that you may not feel great about or that you may not want to display proudly to everybody around you. And, we live in a weird time because I think some people falsely believe that just spilling your guts all the time means that you are being authentic and showing people who you really are. And there may be cases where that's contextually appropriate, but I don't actually think we have to be a leaky sieve spilling out all of our intimate and personal business to everyone all the time. But I do think in a more reflective place, maybe a private place, Each of us has to figure out how to accept our whole and imperfect selves. And I also think the better we are able to do this for ourselves, the better we can see other people as complex and whole, and vice versa. So people who are able to see kind of the multiplicity of another person's being and life and personality and all of that is likely able to understand themselves in that more kind of mosaic and complex way. But our culture is really misunderstanding this, in my opinion. So I'm going to read you a portion of an article that was written in praise of the song talking about Bri, and we'll reflect on it together. Mega's initial video reached over 3 million views, and the creator herself has risen to over 5 million followers. The trend itself has amassed over 30,000 videos, including one from notable Black trans TikTok creator Leandra, who similarly has a large following. Some users have even started to pair the song with fictional characters, engaging in the trend without choosing to share their own story. The trend itself is not without risk, as is the risk when sharing personal stories. Mega herself has even expressed frustration on Twitter, as transphobes have been using the song as means to refer to her by their dead name. Refer to them by their dead name. That's interesting. Yet the song's message has proven itself to be stronger than any hate presents against it, as thousands continue to engage and support Mega's work. So in this write-up, the hate is when people refer to your old name. The hate is not that you've literally split off your old self and have referred to trying to kill her. That's not hate. It's when people refer to you as Bri. That's a remarkable, Orwellian, bizarre way of confusing people about the meaning of things with distorted language. And I recently re-listened to a podcast episode with Helen Joyce that we did, who wrote a phenomenal book. If you guys have not read it and you want to, I would recommend it. But there's a lot about that, about the use of language in our interview. So I'll include that in the links. So I want to point out there are kind of two levels of splitting here, which I've alluded to. There's one, splitting others into all good or all bad, i.e. people who refer to her as Bri are bad because they just refer to who she is and her name previous to the name change. And also, of course, the self. Old me, bad. New me, good. So some cultural commentators and psychologists and random people have definitely been talking about how we might live in a sort of a borderline society, a borderline world. And the borderline personality disorder refers to people who have a very hard time holding in their mind both positive and negative qualities about a person at the same time. And so it becomes very much one or the other. Very clingy, very porous in their identity, gets really latched onto somebody, or that is the worst person in the world and they want nothing to do with them, and that person has harmed me and destroyed me and ruined my life, that kind of thing. So the way this article is written kind of reflects that, and I think a lot of people are right to point out that this is not a healthy way, actually, to look at ourselves or to look at the world around us. There are going to be complex, pleasant and unpleasant qualities and experiences in all aspects of life. So this splitting is not good.